Well, howdy and welcome back. Joe and I have now gone our separate ways and are getting ready to do some deck construction here in Doomtown DB. My goal here today is to put together something in First Peoples with an Abominations theme. As I mentioned in the earlier video, there are no Abominations native to First Peoples, so I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do this. Well, that's not entirely true. I am actually 100% sure how I'm going to do this. I've already got a deck built, which we will kind of work towards from scratch here in real time so that you don't have to sit through the 90 minutes or 2 hours it actually took me to kind of come up with this. Now, that's not to say that it always takes that long to put something together, but it can be fun to kind of just get in there and see what you can do. And this was a particularly challenging deck for me to build, so we'll see what you guys think. So generally, I pick a new deck. When I start a new deck, rather, I just pick any home. It doesn't matter at the moment. I'll just go with the standard Eagle Warden's home, although uh, it's a good chance I'm not going to end up with this particular home. It's not important at this point. Knowing that I wanted to do abominations, I'm going to start using the filters to kind of pull those guys out to see what I have to work with. DTDB, for those who may not know, has a really great set of filters that you can use here. So I'm going to be primarily using the K colon for the keyword filter and the X colon for searching by card text. So let's start by pulling out all of the abominations. And as that kind of comes up here, we can see that if we look just in First Peoples by deselecting these guys, there's nothing there. Same goes for entrepreneurs, law dogs, outlaws. All four of these guys don't have anything. So I know the neutral abominations are just going to be easier to work with, but let's just take a quick look and see what we have. We'll start with anarchists because there are fewer there. A lot of these at lower values, which makes me think that they're probably not going to be great in a deck that requires pulling for any sort of spell or for mad science. Brother Petrovich here, let's see, he's a 2 influence dude. So that's another thing. Knowing that I'm going to be running these guys out of faction, I'm going to have to be paying to bring them into play, of course, but also then paying an additional cost for their influence during the upkeep phase. So at this point, Brother Petrovich is upkeep of 3, considering that he'd be out of faction for Eagle Wardens. So I'm kind of discouraged right off the bat from playing any sort of abominations with influence, which is kind of interesting because First Peoples are all about influence. That's certainly one of their key themes. So I'll have to think about how that's going to work. Moving right along here, we got some other guys with influence that I'm probably not going to be super excited about unless I'm planning on just discarding them or having a ton of income. Let's see, what else do we got here? So yeah, so some of these lower value guys, let's see now what's over in Fearmongers. Of course, the most abominations in this faction. Um, yeah, the ones sitting at lower values definitely could be worth including. No influence cost here. Carlo, that's also really interesting because if everyone in play is an abomination, he gets +3 influence. But again, that's not really something I want to happen because I don't want to pay 3 upkeep for Carl. Um, Bobo's kind of fun because you're not gonna keep him around anyway. You're gonna pay 1 cost to bring him in, 1 Ghost Rock, and then he'll just sort of go away at the end of the day or during the upkeep phase anyway. Um, yeah, 4 upkeep for the Harvester here. Yeah, so I'm not super interested in guys with influence at the moment. And there's actually, we can, I think I less than 1 would should do it. So all these guys are actually fair game. Um, Tixar Lanak, nice 3 stud. could work with him, or a 2 stud in the non-experienced version. Um, yeah, we'll have to see about these if I'm going to try to run Hucksters or Mad Science or something like that. I'm guessing probably not, but we'll see how it goes. All right, and then coming over here to the neutral faction dudes, we got Caretaker. Now this guy's actually really interesting because he works really well if you want him to camp a deed. If he hasn't moved since this turn, then he's pretty much 5 value for stud, and still no influence, so you don't have to worry about that. Not that this really is relevant in the neutral faction. We can pile all the influence we want on these guys, and that's not a problem. Old Howard, that could be interesting. Not sure I want to use Old Howard. Gray Man, also kind of interesting. You can kick dudes off your properties, which could work nicely with First Peoples. And the Wretched, which is going to require some mad science action, and that's not really a strength of First People. So I think, right off the bat, Caretaker kind of gets me excited. Maybe that's something we could build around, and I think just the keys here are, nothing really in faction with or out of faction with influence is going to be something we're necessarily going to be wanting to play. So now that we've looked at all the dudes, let's take a look at all the other abomination cards, or cards that reference abominations, that are not dudes themselves. So that's going to be sorting here just to the neutral faction. Let's see what we got. Holly's Rose. Now this one's also interesting because during sundown they'll have an influence, but during the rest of the day, during upkeep, no influence. So you can put that on just about anybody and not worry too much about that. And then the additional influence if there's an opposing dude at this deed. So again, that plays really nicely into the First Peoples trying to build up control points on deeds. We're probably not going to be running miracles. We can keep in mind some of these interesting deeds for maybe later in the deck building process. Claws is nice. It can only be attached or traded to a dude with the Herald or Abomination keyword. So if we get some Abominations in play, or we have some, this could be interesting. Yeah, not super excited about Mad Science, so you can kind of ignore some of these. Not so sure we're going to be running any sort of hucksters either, so hexes are probably out of the question. Yeah, and again, Mad Science. So the Blighted, that could be interesting. Again, if we have Abominations in play, you can pay a Ghost Rock and get this into play. But still, attach it to any one of your dudes paying all costs. So paying 2 Ghost Rock to get a sidekick, that's not super exciting to me. All or Nothing is kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do. Soul Cage is kind of interesting because if we anticipate having a number of abominations in our boot hill, and there are ways to do that, especially with the Eagle Warden's home, you can discard or ace a card in your hand. Maybe that's some sort of combo there, acing abominations from her hand and then getting them back with Soul Cage. Yeah, Vitality Tonic, also interesting, but again, a gadget. It's probably not where we're going. Essence of Arbitrage, also really great on an abomination, but we'll have to see what our starting posse looks like, etc. So okay, so I think we've got some ideas coming together here. Maybe something with Holly's Rose, giving us sundown only influence, getting the Caretaker on deeds to defend them. Maybe something with Claws, maybe something with Soul Cage. Let's take a quick look and just make sure that we really don't want to run Mad Science or some sort of blessed dude or huckster. Okay, so no mad scientists in faction. Um, let's see, huckster, nope, and blessed, nope. So yeah, I mean, there are of course neutral dudes, drifters that have those skills, but yeah, I'm not really sold that that's the way we want to go here. So what else do we got? Um, let's think now a little bit about homes. So I'm gonna pull up homes for Eagle Wardens, First Peoples rather. So we already looked at Eagle Warden. I mean, the combination of Soul Cage with being able to ace cards from our hand could be interesting, but that's not really that great. It requires them to cheat in a shootout, I'm pretty sure, or maybe not. Let's see. Let's pull it up real quick. Soul Cage. So choose an abomination from your discard pile or boot hill with a cost equal to or lower than the legal hands rank. So that actually does work during low ball. So that could be interesting. So that's something to think about. Um, Gateway to Beyond requires that we're going to be running spirits and wanting to use spirits. It doesn't really play well with Holly's Rose being, I think, on the 2 value. Generally you want a higher values if we're going to be running some sort of deck that requires pulls, other than Kung Fu, of course. Office of Ancestral Affairs. This could be interesting. So, mark an in-town deed that has fewer than 2 control points, and more or less, if you're successful, give it a control point. And then potentially, as a bonus, attach a totem from your discard pile to the mark. So that could be interesting. We could try to get maybe just a few deeds out, run Office of Ancestral Affairs to get a bunch of control points on it, and then camp those deeds with someone like Caretaker or someone else with Holly's Rose who can defend that site. Spiritual Society. Yeah, that's not so exciting. Again, depending on our influence situation, we're going to have influence during sundown, which kind of works, but not during the noon phase. So, yeah, let's just start getting this going. So, I think I think where we're gonna go here is try to put something together with abominations and getting Holly's Rose on some non-abominations dudes to get them to be abominations, pumping up their influence during the sundown phase, and then camping on some deeds. So let's switch over to Office of Ancestral Affairs. And I just take a second here to acknowledge I played some games against Marshall Carter, of course, Richard Carter during the Tombstone event earlier this year, or I guess last year, 2019. And he had a deck called Establishing the Mazagang, where it was all about just running up control points on Mazagang, making it difficult to contest the deed because it's in town but not adjacent to town square or any other um, uh, yeah, it's just not adjacent to town square, so difficult to get to from there. And then um, it was interesting to play against, and I think this deck as it comes together is going to have some similarities. So I'm gonna flip over now to actually the final product. So here we go, Office of Ancestral Affairs. So what I'm not showing that I had done was I kind of just started going through and adding one of each of the abominations that sounded interesting to my deck. I typically like to just add cards in and then have 70, 80, 90, way too many cards in the deck and then just pair it back from there to see where I end up. Um, what I ended up being interested in is Butch Deuces. At the start of the game, I can look at the top 5 cards in my deck and look for a Spirit or a Tire. So it really helps me grab one of these Holly's Roses that I'm running. The caretaker's in here, but not as a starter, and the idea is that I'm going to use Twody, use her noon job, and look for dudes or deeds in my discard pile to play, lowering their cost by 2 to a minimum of 1. So I can fetch characters like the caretaker. I can also use cards like Recruitment Drive to do that. Uh, you'll take a look at my deeds. You see I have 11 deeds, but I have 3x of Epidemic Laboratory. Um, I can use a skilled dude here to put control points on this, and notice which deuces, of course, is Grifter, and more importantly, a Shaman. That's his skill. And then I decided also to run Sarah McQuani, another skilled dude who can move around and become a stud and help me out in shootouts. Um, also have a couple copies of General Store, hopefully help make goods cheaper. And the reason I'm running multiples of deeds is because I'm going to start with Gamora Lot Commission in play. So if I have additional copies of a deed later in the game, I can pitch them using the Gamora Lot Commission to get some Ghost Rock. And importantly, if I'm running a job that then sends those dudes home afterwards, I can bring them back to that deed with Gamora Lot Commission. Similarly, having multiple copies of Epidemic Lab in my deck means there's a better chance of having them in my discard pile to fetch with Tuodi or um, with Recruitment Drive. So thinking that ideally I'll run up a bunch of control points on Epidemic Lab with Office of Ancestral Affairs and with the deed itself after I've hit the 2 control point cap for Office, and then camp on it with the caretaker or just anyone else who has interesting things. Because Office of Ancestral Affairs has this ability to add totems, I was kind of interested to go that route, and there are some totems that are fairly easy to hit. So Mother Bear's Rage, just running 1 copy of that, only requires a 5 to succeed at the poll. Gives me a 2-stud Nature Spirit as backup during a shootout. Um, Silver Pheasant's Bounty just requires no pull necessarily. It's on an automatic +1 production. And, as a bonus, maybe occasionally I'll get the 2 Ghost Rocks, assuming I don't hit a Holly's Rose or a Mother's Bear's Rage or something like that. Um, Red Horse's Trail is nice. Again, if it works out where I can send a dude home booted or booted dude, wonderful. Spirit Trail also to help me get back to the deeds I'm trying to camp. And of course, Ranger's Bible being another attire that I can look for to bump up my influence. I got the one X of Soul Cage in there. I'm not anticipating having a lot of abominations in my boot hill, but there could be some in my discard pile. And of course, Essence of Armitage once I start to get dudes hooked up with Holly's Rose or get a copy of the Caretaker or someone else into play like that. Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of other things. I don't anticipate that this deck is going to be perfect right out of the gate, but at least for me, I found that iterating is important. So get something together, get out there and test it, see what works and what doesn't, and go from there. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this deck does against whatever Joe comes up with, and then also curious to hear what he thinks about this build. So take another break here. You can go check out Joe's video on his own deck construction, and then slide on over to our Octagon match and see how we do. All right, take care.